Righty. Hello. Um. Today I'm going to give you a tutorial on the timeline. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the small little thing that you have down here. It's actually very important if you're ever going to use Wick editor. So I'm going to do a small video talking about how the timeline works and some things alongside with it. First and foremost, as you can see here, the timeline can be seen as the moment you enter. It's immediately down here. It's something that you're going to be able to see. And the first things you may see are some of these buttons. First, you have a button to add a new frame. This can be used to replace stuff that you have placed previously. And you also have something like the twin, which my computer is kind of dying right now, so give me a couple of seconds. Twin, to explain it shortly, is when you make it so that a movement is set. In my case, if I put this here, it would play this. The twin fills in the blank space that you give it. Right here, my clip starts here, and what the twin does is to fill in the blanks. It moves the object for me. This can be used for other things uh, besides moving. It can also be used for opacity. It can be it can be used. It can have a wide array of uses, but that's just a simple explanation. It's something that fills in the blank space for you. That's the short and simple answer. It fills in the blanks. You put the beginning and the end. You can also put a twin part way in between, so that it now fills the in between these three twins. The first twin would be here at the middle, the second up above, the third over here, and what the twin does is fill in the blanks. It moves it for me. So this is very useful to cut down the amount of work you do instead of having to animate frame by frame. Then the next thing you may see is obviously a delete button. This is very simple. It's basically a shortcut for your backspace because you can simply delete a frame by using your backspace. Moving on, here we have layers. This is very important if you want to keep your work organized. Layers, short of it, they are a way so that your work will be organized. Because this gray block I made, will always be behind this clip of a timeline. It will always be behind this because it's in a lower layer. And some of the very good uses that you can get out of this, is that you can split stuff. In my case, I have this two separate, but as you can see, I can interact with both. But to make my life easier, I could lock this layer, and so now I cannot interact with this timeline text. It's set since I hit the lock, the small lock over here. Then you have the height layer, which this is used to completely take out of the equation your layer. In my case now, it's not visible. It doesn't mean it's not there. You have deleted nothing. It's still there. So this is very useful to keep your work organized. I'm going to get into a bit more of specifics, not maybe specifics, but things that affect the timeline that you may not see. One of the main things is your frame rate, because the timeline, as you can see, there's many small numbers here. Each frame is going to the duration of the frame is going to depend based on what your FPS is. This is something very straightforward. If I put 24 FPS here, uh, my work should move smoother, but now it will move quicker. I'm going to once again use a twin. Oh, sorry, incorrect button. I'm going to put a twin here, and it's going to be much smoother than before because there is a higher frame rate now. So yeah, each frame is not a specific duration. Each frame is entirely dependent on your FPS. I'm going to turn it back down to 12 since it's the default. My computer is, I repeat, my computer is dying, sorry. And then moving forward, we're going to get into into some more technical stuff, but these are also very important and useful parts of the frame. If you select your frame down here, I'm going to remove the tween. If you select your frame, you will up here see this. You can put a name, the length of your clip here, so that you have a quick a hotkey for this. And you can also play sounds, but I have no sounds right now with me. I'm not recording sound on my computer, so that you won't be able to hear anything. But you can also make it so that a sound is displayed the moment you enter your frame. That's not the only way to do that, though. That's why I say we're going to start getting to a bit more technical stuff. For the moment, ignore everything I did before. First, the name. With a name, you can now give your clip any name. I'm going to call it uh, frame. It's just called a frame. And so now, this one frame will always be referred to as frame. It doesn't matter in which number it will always be frame. And this can be very useful for what's next. We're going to get into a bit of scripting, which is this over here. The frame, it comes with this basic feature, basically. It's update, load, unload, and default. Default is something that happens immediately. When your frame opens up, the second your frame opens up, the code that's in default will run. It will happen. It's going to happen before anything else. If you're working with Wick editor in hopes of using it as something to make games or more stuff a developing site, then I give the tip you should always put stop in default, because this will always make it so that your work stays in this one frame. I'm going to give you here an example. I have all of these frames, but since I put in here default stop, it's going to stop in this frame. It stays in here because that's what my script said. And so default happens the second you open the frame. It's the first thing that will happen. You can still you can still put multiple lines of code here. But yeah, this happens once the second you open your frame. Then we have load. Load is what happens when you open up the frame, like anytime you open the frame. Default only. I forgot to mention this. This is very important. Default only happens once. It's just the first ever time you open the frame. And then we go to load. In load, whatever you put here, the moment your frame is opened, this code will happen. For example, I want to do something. Let's. My computer's dying. Sorry. I don't know what's happening. Oof, this, that, why. This is a bit more complex, so I'm not going to get into it. But load is whatever happens the moment you open your frame. If I wanted to give you an example, it would take a bit of time. But for the moment, you don't have to worry much about it. Then update. Update, it doesn't really have anything to do with the frames as much as the frame rate. Update is what happened. It's every tick that your computer does, or the web page does. It's going to be translated so that every tick update happens. All code that you put in update will always change. I'm going to do a bit of a demonstration of some of the things I said. I'm going to work here with my timeline so you can look at it. Uh, uh, I don't know why I can't make it bigger. I don't know what happened, but I'm sorry. Wait for me a second. Maybe I can zoom it in a bit so they can see better. It's just like I generally like to work with my screen on the smaller side so that I can have a look at everything. Here it is. Look, I'm going to do a bit of coding here, so I'm sorry if I lose some of you, but this is important to explain the functions of the frame. I'm going to do, first here, I'm also going to put a stop here, so that it does nothing. And here, I'm going to do a button. Then what this button will do is it will go to and stop at frame. As I said, it doesn't matter what number frame it is. I have named this one frame frame. So if I put here, go to and stop frame, it will always go to this one. It doesn't matter if it's number 15 or number 2. It will always go to this one frame. And I'm going to do a bit of magic. And this one goes back to 1. And this is going to take a bit of time. I'm sorry, but this is so that I can give you a clear visual example that showcases all uses of the frame. Because a lot of the uses of the frame come in the case of coding. Because of the frame, if you're working on an animation, basically all you have to know about the frame is the twin, add new frame, and delete. In layers to keep your work organized, but the layers applies for everything to always keep your work organized. I have this one text here. I'm going to give it any name, A. Then here in update, I'm going to do one other thing. As I said, default happens once. It's something that you will do just the first every time your frame is opened. It's just the first time. I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to probably lose some of you here, but I'm doing this for the sake of giving you a visual example of the work here that's been done. And it's going to be a dot set text and e op. This is what the thing that happens the second the frames the first every time the frame comes into B. But then here in update, I'll also put this, and I'll put op equals op plus 1. This is a simple equation to do a counter. A very simple method of doing a counter. Then when it loads, it will be op equals let's say 5. Oh no, equals 0. It will turn back to 0. As you can see, every tick, this is updating. That's what I mean by tick. Every time your computer updates the frame, it will sum up 1. That's update. Every single time your computer updates. Then I go back here. Once again, here, this button has the code go to and stop frame. This one's called frame. I'm going to move it so that I can make what I said earlier clear. It doesn't matter what place it is. Boom. It sends me here. And then this code is running, the update code, and load reset it to 0. The moment I open the frame, it reset to 0. As you can see, every time I open it, it goes back to 0. That's the magic of the update. Update is every single tick on your computer. Load is when you open your frame, and default is the first thing that's done. This just happens once. Then unload. Unload is what happens when you get out of your frame. So basically what you saw me do earlier of going between these two frames, unload is what will happen when I move from this frame to the next frame. What will happen here? what will happen. Although that's a bit harder to showcase. I don't have really any clear visual showcase, but yeah, that's about it. The reason why I mainly talked about code in this tutorial is because the frame, if you're animating, your main use of the timeline is going to be accommodating stuff and organizing. Those are going to be your main uses. But if you're using it for code, uh, then it's basically a default code that will always happen. It's not dependent of anything because it's on your frame, so nothing has to happen for this to go through. That's about it. Uh, I'm pretty sure I left nothing out, but I can never be sure about that. So yeah, thank you for watching around, and thank you.